So it's been nearly 1 week after the Commander September rules ban, and after giving it plenty of thought, let's talk about it. Welcome back, folks, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for dropping by and your ongoing support. My name is Patrick, host of the EDH Brutality YouTube page, in which we upload Magic the Gathering content and analysis every Sunday. Today, we have quite the news to speak about. As a matter of fact, I should have uploaded this days ago when the views were all there, but I really wanted to allow myself some time to let this information digest and really just cool off my whole perspective on it. As always, before we jump right into today's video, a quick and special thanks to patrons like you for making videos like this possible. Now, it should be said that this video is entirely opinion based. Everyone, of course, is entitled to their own opinion. Feel free to leave yours down in the comments section below. One thing that we must make sure of is that those that threatened the rules committee over this past week should honestly reevaluate their stance and the importance of Magic within their life. For example, I got hit hard with this too. I've got 3 Crypts, and I have 2 Lotuses, and I even got my brother a Lotus for Christmas, all of which are practically worthless now, in which I all paid hundreds of dollars for. And of course, was I upset about these bans? Absolutely. But most importantly, we must remain civil about this discourse. Now, for those who are avidly into Magic the Gathering, I'm sure this page is quite familiar with you all, but let's cover it anyways. Today, we have the Commander Banned and Restricted announcements from September 23rd of 2024. On this day, as you can see, Dockside Extortionist, Jeweled Lotus, Mana Crypt, and Nadu Winged Wisdom was banned. So scrolling down the page, let's see what they have to say about this. Commander Rules Committee explanation of the bans. The philosophy of Commander prioritizes creativity, and one of the ways we have historically reflected in the rules and ban list is to encourage a slower pace of game than traditional formats. This gives decks time and space to develop and do different things. We have a goal to make it easier for players who enjoy slower, more social games to have an environment for them to explore. Commander has always had the potential for someone to get out to a fast start and be the first arch villain in the game. But that advantage has been balanced by having multiple players gunning for them at once. That advantage has been balanced by having multiple players gunning it for them once it happens. In the past few years, notably since Strixhaven, School of Mages, we have seen a pattern of stronger mid-game cards that allow the player who skips past the early game to snowball their advantage straight through to the win. Occasionally games like that are fine, but it shouldn't be common, and we're taking steps to bring that frequency down a bit by banning 3 of the most explosive plays in the format. Now, at first glance, one would probably agree with this statement, but upon further discussion and really looking into it, how many casual players in a casual setting are playing Mana Crypts, Jeweled Lotus, Dockside Extortionist, you name it? I mean, don't get me wrong, there are casual pods in which they are played, but typically people spending that amount of money on said cardboard will be slotting them in higher power decks. So rather than a card power problem, I feel this really comes down to a people problem, pub stomping others. You know, I think it really just stems down to people with really strong decks jumping in pods that they do not belong. And will this ban stop this in any way, shape, or form? Absolutely not. So starting with the first ban, the Rules Committee states, Mana Crypt coming down for no mana on turn 1. It's quite possible to have the explosive start of Mana Crypt into a Signet or Talisman, land, and another Signet, leaving that player untapping 5 mana on turn 2. What? Are we talking about a Christmas land hand? Because as an owner of multiple copies of each card, how many games do you really play where you're able to make 4 or more plays on turn 1? And I'll tell you what, it's probably 1 in every 30 to 50 games, if that. Obviously, people can mulligan until they get that Christmas land, but at that point, once again, it is not a card problem. It is a people problem abusing cards and abusing players' goodwill. They go on to say, in games going over 12 turns, the accumulated threat of damage from Mana Crypt provides a reasonable counterbalance for its explosive effects. Well, good, you're just arguing the reason why it should not be banned. And then, of course, they go on to say, when you're snowballing into a turn 6 to 8 win, this is a meaningless drawback, which I don't really understand, because for a casual format, it's almost sounding as if the Rules Committee is telling us how many turns they want each game to be. I understand that some players like long games and others like short games, so what's the issue with that? I, for one, dread games that are 12 games and more. I don't know, it's just weird to me. I don't know why they're really trying to push turn orders with us when they're also so adamant about Rule 0. Going down to our next ban, they have Jeweled Lotus, which states another card that can give you 5 mana on turn 2. Jeweled Lotus does it without even needing a good hand. Though you're restricted in what you can do with the mana, 4 and 5 mana commanders can pack a significant punch nowadays, often drawing cards to make up for one-shot mana, and defense abilities such as Ward can't be interacted with that early in the game. Oh brother, oh my gosh. Okay, here's my main issue with this ban. Jeweled Lotus was the card only able to be played in Commander. It was the card, and now it's utterly useless. Now, I do agree with them. Jeweled Lotus can be played and give you 5 mana without a good hand. But isn't that why it's there? What happens if a player doesn't have a good hand, but they have a commander they can send out? Well, that's going to keep them in the game. If they didn't have Jeweled Lotus and they didn't have a good hand, what happens next? Well, guess what? They end up sitting there and they have an unenjoyable experience with Magic the Gathering. And I'm going to be honest, I feel like this just hurts the game as a whole. Not only does the IP lose an iconic card, but this is also going to restrict deck building. The commanders that are overpowered, that are strong, that can fit just about any card, those will continue to be strong. But what happens to those older commanders people want to play? The ones with high mana costs, without good abilities. Now, there will be players that will say, well, just build a better commander then. Don't use someone as weak. Well, isn't that the reason why Jeweled Lotus got banned in the first place? Because people are playing stronger commanders and abusing the card? If anything, that proves my point in why Jeweled Lotus should not be banned. It discourages creativity and those high mana commanders. I feel it was a great card that players could really accelerate their commanders with, especially if playing with high CMC, a one-time use, in which really isn't that overpowered. Because when you think about it, late game, if you already sent out your commander and you draw into Jeweled Lotus, I feel the drawback sometimes is greater than its advantage, because ultimately it will be a dead card. I don't know, I just don't think it's good for the format banning either of these cards. It discourages creativity, and in some cases, it may even eliminate entire playstyles. Now, in regards to Dockside Extortioners, I could perhaps understand the argument if presented well on why it should be banned, but let's see the rules committee take on said card. Dockside Extortionist. Dockside isn't normally quite as explosive in the early game as the other two cards, but it can still go mana positive on turn 2 and start generating substantial treasures after that. It's been on the board for years, and we've shied away from it acting in the past because the card is scaled well with the power level of the table, but it's a frequent contributor to the more egregious snowballing starts. They just contradicted themselves entirely. They couldn't have made it any more obvious. They say they shied away from acting in the past because the card has scaled well with the power level of the table. So if it scales well with the table, then why is it banned? Because if it scales well in weaker pods where not many artifacts are prevalent, well, guess what? Dockside Extortionist is going to be that much weaker. And not to mention, in higher powered games, it does exactly what you want it to. It closes out the game quickly rather than making it a slugfest. I don't know, red was already a color that struggled, and without Dockside, it's just that much worse of a color. And I personally don't think any of these cards should have been banned. The rules committee goes on to state, we should also talk about the elephant in the room. We're not banning Sol Ring and have no desire to. Yes, based on the criteria we've talked about here, it would be banned. Okay, so why isn't it? They go on to say, Sol Ring is the iconic card of the format, and it's sufficiently tied to the identity of the format that defies the laws of physics in a way that no other card does. Banning Sol Ring would be fundamentally changing the identity of the format. We aren't trying to eliminate all explosive starts. It happening once in a while is exciting, and removing the other 3 cards geometrically reduces the number of hands capable of substantial above curve mana generation in the first few turns. This is so aggravating to read. How is Sol Ring an iconic card of the formats, but cards like Mana Crypt or even Jeweled Lotus are not? Jeweled Lotus was designed to only be legal in Commander, and as respectfully as possible to claim Sol Ring is the only iconic card is quite idiotic. I mean, Mana Crypt is the mana rock to have. You have the Harper Book promo here that came out in 1995. That's right, a card that came out 29 years ago, and has been a staple in the format since its existence. Begs me to ask, how is that not iconic? I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat here, and I'm going to go out on a limb. I'll tell you why it's not iconic like Sol Ring, and that's because Sol Ring has power that the others do not. For those that don't know, the Rules Committee in no way, shape, or form is associated with the IP known as Magic the Gathering. And although Wizards of the Coast does give the Rules Committee its blessing, a Sol Ring ban would result in a lot of angry people. Because after all, if Sol Ring is banned, any product that is on the shelf right now for a Commander Precon will no longer be able to be sold. The same can be said about any future Commander products that are already in the design process. And the ban of a card so prevalent would not only cause Wizards tens of millions of dollars, but I wholeheartedly believe that it would be the nail in coffin in the very end of the Rules Committee, ultimately with Wizards of the Coast stepping in. Because at the end of the day, the entity of Wizards of the Coast and Magic the Gathering is not here to be your friend. It is a business, and if you interfere with its business dealings, it will have no choice but to force its hand. Now, with that said, Wizards of the Coast is just as much to blame. In the past year, they have released sets and products where both Mana Crypt and Jeweled Lotus are chase variants in order to push said products. From a business perspective, this is perfectly fine. However, from my understanding, the Rules Committee was in direct communication with Wizards of the Coast about these bans for some time. Which leads me to my main concern. Why are we trusting this company with our money? If Wizards knew about these bans, then why are they throwing it into product just for them to be worthless? I'll tell you why. They want to milk it for everything it is before they are banned. Why do you think there were so many reprints recently of Mana Crypts? Overall, I think it's super shady business practice. And although I do not agree with it, the Rule Committee was only doing what they felt was best for the game, but I can no longer confidently spend my money at Wizards of the Coast in the game of Magic the Gathering. Now, upon all of this, I took it upon myself to also do some research, as I did lose quite a bit of money like many others. Quite frankly, I wanted to know what gave certain people the ability to wipe out hundreds of dollars of value with a stroke of a pen, even if that's not what the player base wanted. And upon my findings through research as well as ChatGPT, I found some very interesting information, which goes as follows. Since Wizards of the Coast does not directly manage the rules for Commander, they do not impose any restrictions or bans on cards specifically for that format. The Commander Rules Committee provides the official rules and ban lists for the formats, but it's not an enforcement body. So the rulings are recommendations rather than mandatory by any legal or governing authority. However, the RC's rulings are widely accepted as the standard for most playgroups, stores, and events, and following them is generally expected in the broader Magic the Gathering community. Casual playgroups can always house rule differently if they choose, allowing or banning cards outside of the RC's guidance. In summary, while the RC's decisions are recommendations, they have significant influence, and most players and events adhere to them. The Commander Rules Committee is made up of volunteers. The RC is not officially affiliated with Wizards of the Coast, nor are its members paid employees of Wizards of the Coast. Instead, they are prominent figures in the Commander community who have taken on the responsibility of managing the format's rules and ban lists as a labor of love for the game. Which was an eye-opener for me, because whenever I build decks, I always use legal cards because I thought that was the official ruling. So I headed on over to the official bannings page for EDH, and I wanted to see the reasons for other cards banned, since these are simply volunteers that are making recommendations on what can and can't be played. And to put it in simpler terms, you can kind of think of the Rules Committee as the equivalent to Discord mods. And upon further inspection of these cards, was I able to really change my opinion on this committee of individuals. Now, I do understand why some of these cards are banned, and there are smart choices here. For example, Caracal or Caracas, however you want to pronounce it, is a legendary land that ultimately breaks the format. This would be known as a smart ban. However, when looking at other bans like Tolarian Academy, does the water get muddied? As a matter of fact, there are other lands that do the exact same thing with slightly different wording. And of course, these other said lands are not banned. Which begs to ask, what led the rules committee to ban one of the 3 cards and not the other 2? Once again, similar to the Mana Crypt via Soul Ring choice. Going to ban a card, I think you need to ban it across the board, not pick and choose your battles. Next up, we have Golos, Tireless Pilgrim. A great card, don't get me wrong, but its reason for its ban is they wanted to promote diversity in the format. Well, ultimately, isn't that up to the players? Because by eliminating commanders and other cards in the card pool, you're telling people what they can and can't play, which goes against that whole diversity reasoning. But I'm gonna be honest, I lost complete in all respect for the rules committee when I was reading the reasons for the bans for the Power 9. The 5 colored Moxens were originally banned for poor optics rather than power level. While they're fairly powerful, it's the effect on perceived barrier to entry that really posed a problem, because casual players watching Commander games in passing could reasonably assume they needed hundreds, now thousands of dollars in Power 9 mana as table stakes, just to join the format. The Moxen were iconic and expensive cards at the time they were banned, and removing them from the card pool was intended to combat the notion that Commander is a prohibitively expensive and inaccessible format. So just let me get this straight. They didn't ban the card because it was strong, they banned it because it was expensive. Shouldn't a rules committee make decisions based on gameplay and not financial value? Especially if it's value that may affect people that did buy the card. The same can be said for the money I lost in these 5 said cards. I'm not upset about the money lost, because like many others, quite frankly, when you buy the card, you don't typically plan on selling it, you've already spent the money. However, the problem lies in the fact that we spent money in cards we can no longer use. And I guess the whole takeaway from this is I've really lost confidence in the future of Magic the Gathering Commander, because we don't know what other cards may be banned. Is Rhystic Study going to be banned? Other staples like Smothering Tithe, Cyclonic Rift, Mana Drain? We don't know. I myself think it is a very unhealthy state of constant worry, which has led me to the opinion of the importance of kitchen table rules, and I myself will now be purchasing banned cards in proxying from here on out, including in all my decks. Because after all, these said cards are only banned by a committee of volunteers not associated with Wizards of the Coast, but who's to say they love the game any more than any one of us players. The day people force me what I can and can't play and enjoy in life is the day I quit Magic the Gathering. But yeah, that's gonna do it for today's video. I know it was a bit longer, but I really wanted to address the elephant in the room, as well as my concerns with these bans, as well as the trust going forward with this said company. These are uncharted waters ahead, so I recommend you all be very careful. But yeah, that's gonna do it for today's video. As always, if you want to stay tuned for future videos here on the channel, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell down in the bottom right hand corner of your screen. Somebody said, my name is Patrick, host of EDH Brutality. I thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out, guys.